suddenly things started to take off. We started to see results. We got great feedback, great reviews. We started seeing people purchasing multiple items. And I realized, okay, we've done it now. We've realized like what the mistakes we made before, and we started to grow. We started to see things run smoothly. And because we avoided repeating that same mistake, it reinforced in me the importance of just embracing those former mistakes.
The first mindset shift that we've noted, okay, it's all about risk taking and having a certain attitude to risk and how that can affect your successes or failures. So how would you say from your entrepreneurial journey, how would your attitude to risk have adapted, and what would you suggest is the best attitude to have towards risks for new entrepreneurs?
Yeah, being willing to take calculated risks is an important attribute for an entrepreneur, I believe, and it certainly has been for me. I think if you're going to let the fear of failure hold you back from starting because you're so afraid of the potential risks, then you'll never do anything. You'll just be stuck in this holding pattern. So it reminds me when I was first getting started and I was late up one evening and I was doing some market research around like kind of which industries that I wanted to build my first e-commerce business in. And I was looking at a potential niche market, like kind of an industry, and it was highly competitive. And the old me would have probably thought, well, again, why would I succeed in a market like that? There are plenty of people that have been in that market for years. Why would I have any chance? And I think I asked around and I looked at some forums online for like, is it worth starting a business in this market? So use the example of barbecues, for example. Should I launch a barbecue retailer? That's the example we always go to. And online, you can imagine like people are like, no, absolutely, that industry's crowded already. It's so competitive. You'd never be able to do it. There's global brands spending millions of pounds on their marketing budgets. Like, why would you? And it would have been the same if I'd asked friends and family, like thinking of launching a barbecue retailer, that have been like, okay, all right, like come back to us, when you've failed. But no, I decided that I could take a calculated risk. I'd done extensive research in the first industry that I wanted to go into, and I'd created like a unique value proposition that would differentiate our brand from the other retailers in that industry. And as we went along, of course, we faced obstacles. Of course, there were issues with like gaining the trust of suppliers or finding the right customers at the right cost per acquisition for a customer and trying to carve out our space in that market from all of the competitors in there. But over time, we stayed committed, we learned from our experience. And over time, as we fine-tuned some of the strategies and really focused in on providing top quality customer service, we managed to start to see the results of taking those early calculated risks compound. And then eventually, your tolerance to risks builds up because you've got like a buffer, you have a safety net, you have money in the bank, you have a team, and you can say, oh, we're going to take a risk here and we're going to launch, you'll go into a slightly different industry because we can back it if it goes wrong. When you're first starting out, I think unless you have a very clear step-by-step path to get you to the point where you want to get to, the risk is that you make a mistake that you may not recover from. So that's why I'm such a big advocate for like mentorship and training, because without that, you are effectively navigating blind, and the risk is that, you might make a mistake you can't recover from financially. Now, I think that's an extreme example, but that's kind of why we have the step-by-step plan to get up and running now.
Yeah, I think risk is an interesting one because there's always going to be some risk involved with starting a business. But what we can do is mitigate that risk so that the way we take on risks is that they are calculated. There's always a chance of failure, but we know that we've taken on enough advice or we've followed the right training program so we can mitigate that and improve our chance of success. So for me, when I started in e-commerce, in the e-commerce world, I wanted to take a risk. I wanted to start a business. When I first started, I didn't do as much calculation of the risk as I should have done, because I just was so keen to start that I found the first model that looked good on YouTube, and it was to sell low ticket items from China, which I've talked about before. And the specific product that I sold, because I've sold a few, was these no tie shoelaces. Okay, so think about they're shoelaces, but they're elasticated. You don't need to tie them up because there's a little clip that you clip together, and it saves you the time of the 10 seconds that it takes you to tie your laces. So a genius invention, of course. But I was trying to sell these from China for £10-15 with a little Facebook ad. And actually, in truth, it was probably one of the first products that I saw that I knew I could drop ship and find at a very cheap price. And straight away I went into it and took that risk and started spending money on ads to try and sell these. I didn't do any of the validation criteria that I would do now to find out if there's demand, to find out if people are actually searching for this type of product. And so inevitably it was a failure because I spent far too much money on ads and there wasn't the demand there to justify the money that I had spent on to sell these products. So I learned from that. You've got to take risks in business. There's always going to be an element of a risk, but make sure you mitigate that risk and make a calculated risk as much as you can. So yeah, great point, Lewis. Completely agree with that one. Moving on to another mindset shift that we think people that should have, it's crucial, is similar to what I've just mentioned, is about embracing failures. So having a certain attitude to failures. So how can embracing failures help us become better entrepreneurs?
I think failures are part of entrepreneurship. You have to come to terms with failing, and failing quickly, or failing forwards, as they say. I think you have to use those failures and embrace them and learn from them and use them to improve your business and make sure that you can avoid making the same mistakes over and over again. When I started out and I initially entered into the world of e-commerce and I launched, I think, an initial store and then another store afterwards, and I was making quick mistakes, right? I was failing quickly. And the first store was it was before I used the home turf advantage model, which we now use, but I was selling low price items like luxury candles, right? So using beeswax, and it was like kind of this eco beeswax candle thing. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not a market that you can succeed in. Absolutely is. It doesn't use the model that we use now. And the margins were just very, very slim. And there were all kinds of issues with that in terms of supply, and the cost of goods was very high, and it had to be a real strong brand and value proposition around that and differentiation from other brands. And then I also launched another store, and that was in selling men's fashion accessories, so things like ties, like neckties. And I think both of these stores had very low sales volumes, lots of issues, lots of potential, headaches and problems. And initially, my reaction was, I'm disheartened. I've failed, right? But now I look at it and think, well, that was all just part of the journey. I wouldn't have got to where I am now had I not gone through those initial struggles. And so I look at it now as, how quickly can I make enough mistakes and how fast can I fail so that I get to the next point. I'm failing every day. There's all kinds of things we try in all of our companies now that don't work. And I'm like, okay, we don't call it failing though. We now call it testing. We'll test a new market. We'll test something, test a new ad platform, a new strategy. Does it work? Does it not work? I wouldn't be like, it didn't work. Shut the whole thing down, shut the business down because it didn't work. It's just part of the day-to-day routine now. So I think my mindset has shifted so far beyond being disheartened by failures. I now look at that as like, what's the next challenge? What do I need to try and figure out? So I analyzed those mistakes though. That was what was important. I didn't just keep doing the same thing and say, I failed, so I'll just go and do a slightly different store in a very similar niche. I looked and I realized I was going after the wrong target market for the type of business that I wanted, the lifestyle business, the low maintenance, the high ticket, high profit margins. And I didn't have enough margin. And I was using the wrong marketing channels. I was trying to use Facebook and Instagram ads to drum up interest in products that maybe they were in demand, but people weren't searching for them on those platforms. That's why with the home turf advantage model that we teach, we now use Google, because that's where people are searching for the products. So we just get the products in front of them. So yeah, eventually I shifted industries from that and I landed on selling products that were upwards of £300 per item. So with a nice, healthy profit margin on every single sale. And I addressed an audience's need. I looked, well, what are the problems that the audience are facing? What are the market looking for? And how can I create a brand that addresses that? And suddenly things started to take off. We started to see results. We got great feedback, great reviews. We started seeing people purchasing multiple items, and I realized, okay, we've done it now. We've realized like what the mistakes we made before, and we started to grow. We started to see things run smoothly, and because we avoided repeating that same mistake, it reinforced in me the importance of just embracing those former mistakes and making sure that you learn from those failures to keep iterating and keep improving upon what you do. And I do that in all areas of my life now.
That's really interesting, Lewis. And from the outside listening to your story, it's quite clear to me that was pivotal and really helpful in a way that you had those failures. But the difficulty is when you're going through a failure at the time and it's all you can see, it's so easy to like write off and make a broad generalization that this doesn't work. So when I had the similar failures with my initial e-com stores and the low ticket items I was selling, I could have written off e-commerce. I could have written off online business altogether if it didn't work for me straight away and I'd lost money through doing it. If I didn't have an embracing failure kind of mindset and realizing that this was a learning step, then I could have easily got carried away with that and never be where I am today with an online business that's thriving. So we've got to embrace failure. I think that's such a good point, Lewis.